Hi, everybody. How are you? Um, my name is Rafael Dona, and I'm our host, Happy Help, and I'm here with again our host Clare Kumar, executive coach, speaker, and founder of Happy Space, a podcast, online community, and more. Claire has worked with thousands of professionals to boost productivity and performance through one-on-one coaching, keynotes, and workshops. She's also been a regular contributor to national media on the topics of organization, productivity, work-life integration, and inclusivity. Welcome to our second conversation in the series, Productivity for Neurodivergent Professionals, with again, your host, Claire Kumar. Today, we're exploring how to manage your time, to structure your day to feel proud of both what you accomplish and how you show up. We'll want to hear from you, so get your questions ready and keep that raise your hand button close because we really want to talk with you. Also, don't forget to follow Claire on Fishbowl to get notified about new events and make sure you don't miss any talks in the series. You can also follow her on social media as at Claire Kumar. She uses that handle for everything, so it's easy to find her. So, well, Claire, take it away.
Thanks so much. Happy to see you all coming in. Hi, Voltaire, Tiffany, Taryn, Johnny. Good to see you all coming. And I hope you brought some questions for today. I've got a lot of information to share with you, but I do want to make sure that we have questions all the way throughout, not just at the end. So, questions, the way to do it is to raise your hand, and we can invite you onto the virtual audio stage to join us in conversation. Or you're very welcome to send Rafael a DM and state your question there. That way you can request to be anonymous and Rafael will bring your question to light for the group. And if you've got a question, I can tell you that you're speaking for other people as well. So don't be shy and please feel free to ask a question. So I'm really excited to share. This is the second in the series that we're doing, productivity for neurodivergent professionals. I've worked as a coach for about 15 years now in organization and productivity, and many of my clients have been diagnosed or undiagnosed as neurodivergent. I identify as neurodivergent. There is neurodivergence in my family: ADHD, autism, high empathy, lots of different ways to show up. I think there's a continuum, there's a spectrum, there's all kinds of nuance in how we look at this different way of being. And one thing I'll tell you is working as a productivity coach, I have noticed that everything that I studied in the realm of productivity that would help someone that's neurodivergent would generally help everybody. So these are tried and true strategies. But what I want to also say is that productivity is very personal. Productivity is personal. So even if you hear something here that was worked for a lot of people, it may not work for you exactly that way. You might have to find it a way to make it your own. So I've got a lot of suggestions today for how to think about time and your relationship to time and how to have a better experience with it so that you feel better about managing your time. One of the things that a lot of people come to me when we're beginning a coaching journey is they're feeling a little stressed, they're feeling under pressure, and they're feeling like they get through their whole day and they've worked, but they don't really know what they've accomplished. And so they're feeling very frustrated by that. And some of the strategies we're going to talk about today should help with that as well. I want to start with sort of a perspective on how we look at time. I'm based in Toronto, part of North America, and do look at productivity and how different cultures look at it. But I would say in our culture, which is very much celebrating more is better, faster is better, there is a real expectation that we're taking work and modalities and expectations from the factory floor and how we used to think about designing work for efficiency and not wasting time and applying them to humans and thinking, boy, yeah, we're going to get the best out of everyone by applying pressure and science and squeezing people. And I'm here to say, as with my biology degree in tow, that we'd have to take a different approach and first and foremost recognize that we're human animals. And if we're human animals, we have to recognize that we have different abilities to pay attention. We're subject to the impact of our environment. Hands up if you're in an a open concept office and find it a little hard to focus, for example, or if your commute is really exhausting and affects you, are you able to get anything done on that commute? Can you listen to an audiobook? Can you read something? Can you, or do you have to pay attention and be so vigilant on your commute that by the time you get to your office, you're tuckered out? That was me back in the day when I had to take the subway to work in downtown Toronto. I would get to my office and I would be already tired from what I'd been through just getting to work. But if we look back and we go back to about 1915, there's a work, Scientific Management and Labor by Robert Franklin Hoxie, Hoxie, that's his name. And what was really interesting to look at, if we look at that text, there was actually an intent that I think got tossed to the wayside over time. And in the book, it talks about it says, sets each workman to the highest task for which his physical and intellectual capacity fits him, stimulates and energizes them intellectually, and promotes their self-reliance and individuality. Well, those are some concepts, this respect of capacity and physical and intellectual capacity, and also intellectual stimulation, that really connects to a lot of why we might be motivated to work. And I think in some of what we've seen about optimizing and squeezing the best out of people, we've kind of expected to people to put those two things aside and be motivated anyway. And I don't think we can dismiss them. I think another thing we can't dismiss is our natural relationship to time. And I'd love for each of you to just think a little bit about your particular sense of time. How strong is your connection to time? Can you judge, for example, how much time has passed when you're working on something? Do you have a good sense of how long an activity would take to accomplish? It's really tricky when you're starting a new job unless you have, unless it's very simple steps and very, very easy to do, not a lot of variables. But we have different abilities and different relationships to actually staying on top of the passage of time, and understanding how we operate with it is really, really powerful. And if we're looking at neurodivergence, and I'm thinking in particular here of ADHD, we might have something called time blindness, which means that our connection to time is like, right, I get now, I don't get past too much, and I definitely don't get future and planning for the future. So I have to think in chunks of what's present before me. And so the opportunity to turn the abstract nature of time into something concrete that we can interact with is really, really critical for an ADHD brain. So we need tools like a calendar we can see. We need timers that can show us the passage of time. All of these things become really powerful. And I would highly suggest having some analog. You may have digital representation of time, but that's even more abstract because it's just clicking a digit from a 6 to a 7, for example. But if you're going from the 2 to a 3 on a clock, you can see those 5 minutes pass and you can have a sense of that time passing. Same way if you're looking at an analog timer. So analog is absolutely your friend in terms of making that abstract more concrete. And a physical calendar or a screen large enough so you can see a full month, for example, can get that whole month more in your head than perhaps looking at a list of dates. So figure out how you can bolster your relationship with time and make it a little easier for your brain to handle. I will make an invitation for questions. Again, if you have any questions at all, definitely you feel very comfortable to raise your hand or send Rafael a direct message, and he will be able to bring your question to the table and we'll share it there. I want to also share that we live in different cultures, and personally, I grew up with a couple of perceptions of time. My mom was from England, it was always tea time, and my dad was from India, and it was almost always tea time as well. But there was something else I grew up with, which we called Indian Standard Time. And we joked about it because that meant that if you were invited someone somewhere, you would never show up on time. You would come a little bit late, maybe even beyond fashionably late, which in our culture is also a term that we use sometimes. And Indian Standard Time just became a running dialogue around the fact that in our community we didn't really take the start time as the start time. Then I spent 3 years living in Japan and learned about the Japanese cultural relationship to time. And if you were taking a train in Japan, there would be so many trains coming and going on the same platform that you wanted to make sure you had that train time down to the minute. Because if you were a couple minutes either side and got on another train, you would probably be going in a completely different direction. So we have cultural relationships to time. And I would say in your organization, you can probably sense within a team or within the whole company itself the kind of respect that there exists for time. Do meetings start on time? Do they finish on time? What kind of spirit is there around our relationship to time? And you'll probably be influenced to operate with that kind of relationship, which may or may not be helpful or may be challenging for you. I also have to say that our relationship with time and our ability to be on time can absolutely be influenced. And I'm going to use a personal example here again. I was married for a very long time to a gentleman who, when we got married, his friends said, "Oh, I hope you told him the wedding was half an hour early because he's late for everything. He's going to be late. So I hope you told him that." And then when we were living in Tokyo together, and we'd make plans to meet at a subway station. Now, a subway station in Japan, if you were at Shibuya Station or Shinjuku in Tokyo, you would have millions of people who, and this is by no means an intent to be racist, but many people looked the same from the back. Dark hair, suits. If you were a gentleman, you were likely in a suit. This is back in the 90s. And you had dark hair. And for you to find someone in a crowd was pretty challenging. You didn't have the variety that I think even in Japan, we'd see a lot more variety now in terms of dress as well. And I would get really frustrated because he would be late. And one day I said, you know what? I'm going to have a new strategy, new boundary. And I'm going to wait half an hour. There's a half an hour window from our meeting time. And at the end of half an hour, I'm going to decide that I'm going to move on to whatever next I have planned, and that you're fine. And maybe just something happened and you got waylaid or you chose not to come. We didn't have cell phones at the time, so we didn't have a way to connect. And so from that day forward, he was never late again. It was amazing. It was like a switch got flipped, and the commitment to being on time shifted. And so we can talk about that if anybody's got a question about how do you shift that and how do you design for that. But building more time awareness is really a hook. And I've got a couple of strategies for you. You can start noticing when you're energized to pay attention to time. You might feel like a deadline is helpful. So if you have a timer, that just act of having a timer and playing beat the clock, get a task done before the timer runs out, can be super, super helpful. Notice when you're likely to dismiss time. Could you get into a deep focus situation and really feel like, oh, time is, I'm not aware of time anymore, because you're really deeply focusing on what you're doing and entering that flow state. And that's when your concept of time in a beautiful way kind of diminishes, and you might need a reminder to pull your attention out of what you're doing. I needed it this morning to meet somebody in a Zoom call, and I was knee deep in something else, and I needed a reminder to pull me out. And so when are you likely to dismiss it? That's when you need reminders. I want you to start to guess how much time activities will take. And even further than that, you can time them, especially something you don't think you want to do. We often have a propensity to imagine that the things we don't want to do will actually take longer than the things we think we'll enjoy doing. And it may be completely in our head. It may not be exactly what happens, but it may be completely in our head. So I want to leave you with those and give you a second to think about a question that you might want to ask and or send a Raphael a DM. And I'll check with you now, Raphael. Are there any questions? Have any questions come up?
Not yet, Claire, but we can always welcome our new guest and remind them that this is Proactivity for Neurodivergent Professionals with Clare Kumar, experienced executive coach specializing in proactivity and inclusivity. Today, we're exploring how to manage your time, to structure your day, to feel proud of both what you accomplish and how you show up. Make sure to follow her in Fishbowl so you don't miss any talks in the series. And we really want to hear you. We want to hear your questions. So get ready, have your raise your hand button closed. And if there's anything you want to add to the conversation, you're welcome. So I think we can wait for a few questions. And okay, Natalia has something to say. If Natalia's raising her hand, I'm going to invite her as a speaker. So
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining. Natalia, what would you like to ask?
So thank you. It's super helpful, everything. So most days when I have a few things, so just some background, I'm currently not working, but I do try to do some type of activity or activities almost every day. But for those days where it's like I don't have any deadlines or activities, I feel like in my mind, I'm like, oh, I have all day, and then I lack motivation. So for like days like that, how would one manage time or like get the day started even if you don't have any deadlines or activities?
You raise such an important point, and anybody, especially being in a transition in and out of work, many of us have been through that, and I have noticed through coaching people in that as well, that imposing a structure of some kind can be a real blessing. And structure can relate to work, but it could also relate to exercise. It could relate to social connection. It could relate to um, even just exploring questions or a visit to the art gallery, things to do to expand your mind. But that blank slate can be rather daunting, and you can kind of float in it and the whole day goes by and you're like, what happened? It can be really tough. So I think figuring out what kind of daily structure suits you. It can be our even the time of day that we like to eat. I can tell you that my cats have a daily structure and they don't have a job to do, but they will definitely come and tell me when it's time to eat, for example. Natalia, feel free to just jump back in if you have something else to say about that. Does that helpful at all?
Yeah, the only other follow-up question I had was, could you elaborate more on the exploring questions portion?
Exploring questions about um, give me a little bit more. What
Oh,
help
so
me
you
cue that.
listed, yeah, so you
Yeah.
listed like doing exercise, social connection. So I do that
Yeah.
stuff. But then you also said exploring questions. So I wasn't sure what
Oh,
you meant by that.
yeah, sorry. So things that you're innately curious in, right? So even while you're looking for work, you're living a rich and full life and you have natural curiosities. So maybe this is a time, especially in between jobs, where you're making sure that you're not just in the grind of the job search, that you're also saying, you know what, I had time to do some things for me in that. So what are your curiosities? What are things that you would like to do that might fit into your calendar? And they don't have to fit just after hours now. They might fit in a morning. And so you're able to plant what's important to you in your calendar from your own personal curiosity, social connection, and then all the things to take care of mind, body, spirit. I don't know. I know a lot of people who have been in that in between position, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've got so busy doing things I enjoy. How am I going to fit work back in?" So, so I invite you to think about what some of those things might be.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Natalia. Thanks so much for joining. Raphael, do we have more questions?
Yes, we have a couple of people here wanting to speak. So go ahead. I think that the first one was Abby.
Hiya, thank you. I had a question. It's something I heard a while ago, and it was to do with kind of one of the biggest triggers for dysregulation being rushing. And I know you're saying kind of like timing and watching the timer go down. I've actually just bought an hourglass kind of from that same mentality, but how do you counter the dysregulation? Like, I will make a ton of mistakes if I am working towards a specific time slot rather than if
Yes.
I keep things quite open-ended for myself.
Great question, because there's a positive about having the beat the clock mentality, and there's also a pressure that could be counterproductive. So I think it's figuring out a little bit about that knowledge of how long that task should take, so that you've got a reasonable expectation. So I want you to feel comfortable as you move through your day. My daughter and I came up with a term, actually it was her term. Things start to feel squishy and slightly claustrophobic if we don't have enough time to not only do them, but to think about how we're going to do them. So make sure there's ample time so let's just take, just not a work activity, but part of the workday. What are you going to wear today? And so getting dressed is very quick, but deciding what you're going to wear could be more involved. It could be first looking at the weather, figuring out where you need to go, figuring out what shoes work, and then what are the clothes that go from that shoe decision, for example. So allowing enough time in your processing for the action and the thinking. I say work your PECs, and PECs are planning, execution, and calibration. And so planning is deciding how you're going to do something. Execution is the doing it. And the calibration could be the really interesting point to apply here as you think about noticing about time. Calibration is, what did I notice that worked? What did I notice that I could do better or differently next time? And that might really give you a better shot at setting up the right amount of time so you have that breath that you say makes you feel more comfortable.
Thank you. Oh no, that's great. I'll try to implement that. And then a second question that I had was to do again with time slotting, right? So I think that a big issue can be it's so easy to get sucked into certain activities, and the hyper focus and say a resource isn't there when you need it. You just end up kind of going down this rabbit hole. So even allotting a 20-minute slot or half hour to research something can easily turn into that 2 hours just to get what you need. Do you have any kind of, I guess it's an almost like internal boundary setting, but any tips that you have for addressing that sinking into a certain activity?
I love the question, and what you can't see is I'm nodding because I totally get you, because I've gone down numerous rabbit holes myself. I think you've got to have the bigger context of the day and what's important to you in that day. Have it in your consciousness before the day starts. If you go down the rabbit hole at the beginning of the day without that, it's very easy to get pulled in. But one of the tools I use, I call it a focused 5. And from my big to-do list of all of the things that I know I want to commit time to, every day I figure out what's on my focused 5 list that will bring my attention to those things. So it's a finite list. It's not my big whole to-do list, which would overwhelm me if I had to look at it. I've chosen specific things for that day. So I have a sense of what the cost of going down that rabbit hole might be. And I might well choose consciously to do that and reprioritize. But if I haven't increased my consciousness of what's important to me in that day in that fuller perspective, then I might sabotage myself and not leave myself adequate time for that which is important. I'll use this talk as an example. I knew it was coming up. I knew I had material beforehand, and I've been gathering slides. We're actually creating a Zoom at the same time, and we're going to make the video available on my website. So Fishbowl, it's clarekumar.com/fishbowl. You will be able to see the slides that I've prepared to support what I'm talking about. But back to your question, I needed to know what I had to do today and give myself a real clear time box. And I knew I couldn't go past it because I added other things. And so that consciousness is going to be, I think, the most powerful thing for you to have, along with setting a reminder to pull yourself, to invite you out of that hyper focus. And the first thing I want you to do is come back and check your calendar, which I call it a roadmap. Your calendar is a roadmap reflecting your intentions, and it's also a diary of what you've done. But that focus 5 is a way to really boil it down to, this is what I want to accomplish. And that's the most powerful tool I've found, is that mini list, to bring your attention back to that. How does that help?
Sorry, I was muted. I think that's super helpful. I'm not someone that consciously creates a calendar or uses my diary in that way. So I think that there's definitely the chance to implement, if not just for time tracking, but just to kind of have those blocks and reminders. So thank you.
You're welcome. I just want to expand for 1 second on that concept of the calendar as roadmap and diary. We have intentions, we have ideas of the things we want to accomplish. What do we want to get done? And the calendar is the place to connect those intentions with how we're going to bring our attention to those tasks. And it's this importance of making this abstract nature of time something more concrete that we can actually be in relationship with. So it's not all swirling around in our incredible minds, along with everything else, and with a great likelihood that it might get forgotten. So thinking of your calendar as a capturing of those intentions, and the tools for reminders as the invitations to bring your attention to those intentions. And then as you get to review this calibration period, how did my day go? How truly did I stick to my intentions? Adjust your calendar, what's in it, so it actually reflects how you spent your time. Then you can have a little bit of an exploratory session to look at, how closely were you able to stick with intention? How much did you say, no, I'm reprioritizing a rabbit hole? I think we need to get that on a t-shirt. Reprioritizing rabbit holes is definitely something a lot of neurodivergent people can do. And I think then you can hopefully step into some curiosity about what you might do to set yourself better for success. Okay, I hope that's helpful about how to use your calendar a little bit. I want to just lay down one more thought, and then I see Tiffany with your mic off, so I'm going to come to you in a minute. But I want to just share one more thought about the fact that we're human animals means that we're responding to our environment, and a big part of our environment is our natural light. And our natural light informs our body clocks. We have in our brain something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's the body clock, essentially, that helps regulate our sleep and waking, along with hormones like melatonin you would have heard of. We also have clocks in all of our organs. And my cats for sure can tell the time based on their hunger pangs. They will come and tell me at 7 in the morning, Mama, it's time for food. 1 in the afternoon, snack number 1. 4 o'clock, I want dinner. And 9 o'clock, treat time. And they are like clockwork. And we are the same way. And if we can tune into and honor ourselves to offer ourselves a very similar experience every day, we can have a smoother existence. We can have this respecting of our circadian rhythms, which is this daily cycle. We can also honor our chronotype, which is, are you a night owl? Are you a morning person? Are you somewhere in between? And knowing which chronotype you are and designing your life to support that chronotype as much as possible is an incredible gift that you can give yourselves, and hopefully negotiate with your workplace as well. Some literature that you might dig into on this, there's an individual named Dr. Michael Breus, Breus. He broke it up into 4 categories. The lion wakes early, 15 to 20% of people. The bear is the middle of the day, sleeping at night, awake during the day, 50% of people, and the wolf, let me do my work late at night, or night owl, let me do my work late at night, 15 to 20% of people. And then also the dolphin, 10% of people have really irregular sleep and wake cycles. And that you might hear this morning person, night person, and say, I'm all over the place. And that may very well be true. So do what you can to support and honor who you are. There's a whole other conversation about shift work and night shifts and how to best manage that. My love is actually a helicopter pilot and works half days, half nights, and has to flip his schedule every few days. And it takes a lot of commitment. We both honor his sleep first and foremost, and it helps us both actually manage our sleep. So, Tiffany, I see that you're unmuted, and I would love to know if you have a question.
Hi, yeah, I don't know what's happening on this because it's been muting and muting me, and I'm not touching it. So I'm sorry.
Okay.
I actually think Udin is before me, so I can.
Okay.
I don't. Again, I'm sorry. It's beyond my control. Like Raphael keeps muting me, and it's unmuting on its own. So I don't want to skip ahead. You done? Because I think they were there first. So I can wait a second.
Tiffany, how gracious of you, and thank you, and don't need to apologize. I'm happy for your patience. Okay, so Diane, you can let me know if I'm saying your name correctly. First off, please.
Yeah, you did. Thank you, and thank you, Tiffany. So mine is a quick one. Well, first of all, thank you. This is very helpful in terms of time management, which is a big challenge for me. I wanted to find out that book you mentioned towards the beginning, which is maybe from the Industrial Revolution about productivity. Could you run that by me again?
You bet. Just going back to look the title up myself. Okay, it is the cover. I found this online. Scientific Management and Labor. And the gentleman's name is Robert Franklin Hoxie, Hoxie, and it comes all the way back from 1915. And
Wow.
it's amongst the time of Frederick W. Taylor, who was studying the scientific management of factory shops. So you've got to go way back in time and to look at the thinking there. And I think some of the thinking was brilliant, and I think it's been wildly misinterpreted now. And I think our modern day office folks probably could do well to read it, actually. So,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
the topic is super interesting. So thank you for this.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for the question. Tiffany, I would love to come to you now.
Hi, thank you so much. So again, this is probably the worst ADHD moment anyway for me, but I think you might have already answered some of this. I'm late diagnosed ADHD and high functioning autistic. And as I'm now older than a 20-year-old, things are getting kind of worse, but I've always managed to figure out a system for me where ADHD will cover my autism, and my autism will cover my ADHD, and I show up early, super early, like an hour early. That aside, when I do creative work, what happens, and I think it's called add-on tasking, where I'll be in the middle of the one thing I know, I feel like I'm pretty good at prioritizing, and then it just flies, I jump shark, man. And I know there's 3 other things. I had a project that I knew there were 3 other things to do, but I then thought, the autistic part was like, well, you know what? If I do that one first, that'll inform the one I'm working on. And that way I could have a bigger break. Like I'll look at the bigger picture
Yeah.
of what will inform the micro moment that they really wanted kind of first, but it's all got to be turned in. And to that parallel, I'll be working on a thing, and this is what's happened to me all my life since childhood. I'll start thinking of this other thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what needs to be said. And they're creative things, by the way.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
one time stopped the middle of what one thing was to write this bio for another person, because I was like, oh yeah, that's a great line. And I decided to just follow that path, and I did it. And then I went back. This was one of the smaller acute things that worked out well. But back to the other bigger issue, I do have a timer. It has a light on it. It goes off and then it freaks me out. So I sometimes use it, sometimes not. I'm
Yeah.
trying all these things, and per a day, it'll switch up on me. But the one thing that I've noticed is that when I'm not following that creative moment, like when I stopped and said, I got to write her bio now because I feel I got the words flowing, but I
Yes.
wouldn't have gotten there if I didn't start this one thing that had to be done first. But it's the weirdest thing to where you can set the box thing. I think
Yeah.
like Obama, like all these people, let's do the box system per this chunk of time.
Right. Right.
Creatively, when I have a flow,
Yes.
and this is not even honoring anything me creatively. Like, I feel like if I don't submit another cover letter, if I don't do all this, I have not done anything really truly creatively for me in a long time because I'm constantly looking for a job. And I don't know how to tell anybody that I might not be on task. I mean, this is a whole thing you're not talking about right now, but getting a job when you know, now that I know what's going on, as
Yes.
opposed to bartending on the side and just doing all this freelance work, I can't get in the door because I've had so many different jobs because that's how I'm multi-potentialite. I don't have a linear
Yes.
thing. But then when I do get a
Yes.
gig, I'm like, I don't know how much as a freelancer, I don't know how much to charge. I don't know how long this is going to take. And creatively, I don't want to ruin a flow. And let me tell you, because I stopped into that other thing that'll inform the one thing, it
Yes.
was a charm, but it took a long time to turn all that stuff in. So
Oh, I
I
feel
go,
you. I
I
feel
don't
you.
know what to do. I feel like you've kind of answered this, but I've tried
I
a lot
feel
of
you.
different techniques.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Number one of the things that came up for me in you telling the story is just how much the brain is working through this. And one of the things that I found helpful personally is breath work meditation, to be able to calm and slow things down so that I can feel calmer going through all that turbulence that you just described. Because there's a lot of flip flopping and prioritizing and convincing oneself of what one ought to be working on and that it's okay to let something go and come back to it, all of that. So I think number one point I want to make is regulating one's nervous system and learning how to practice that regulation so that you can come to the breath and before you start a task be grounded as much as you can, and when you come out of a task however long that might be, to be then grounded again. I think that's super powerful. The other idea I have for you is to have idea parking lots. So I get that with the bio because I had to submit a bio this morning. I'm doing some coaching for a conference coming up in June, and they wanted the 100-word bio, and that came up first. There's sometimes a pocket in the morning where I want to speaking of sort of momentum and getting in the flow of knocking things off, have some shorter things that can really get you going where you can feel like you've accomplished something and build that momental energy and then come to something that's perhaps a bit lengthier. That can be ideal if you've wavered from your ideal, this is the big thing I'm going to work on, and you've got little things to have that invitation to come back, or to put them in a parking lot. I put a lot of ideas in parking lots saying, I don't know when I'm going to bring my attention to it, but I don't want to lose the idea. So whether that's an online notebook, a paper notebook, something where you're going to one place to just, this is where I go when I'm getting off the ramp of where I thought I was going, and then coming back. There's little structural things that might help, but overall, I want to just say I get you because you don't know where the thoughts are going to all come from and where they're going to take you. The goal is to build a brain, I think, as much as you can that can calm and center and make decisions based on that bigger picture context, which you understand as well.
Yeah, I've actually always kind of done that where I call them taskers. Like I do like pre-task things like, oh, I'm
Yeah,
going to just, reconcile my bank account real quick. Cause
yeah,
it's like a soothing thing,
yeah,
but also it's turned into, goes down. Some of those don't always work out to where I'm responding again, stay off the tweets, but you respond back and it turns into a moment where you're problem solving. And I didn't realize that's another thing I just saw where if something needs to be problem solved, I'm like, I'm on it,
yeah.
even though I got like a big project.
Oh,
And
yeah, because you know why? Because we're getting a lot of dopamine from that. We're getting a lot
right.
of satisfaction, ticking something off. We feel charged by that. So I love that you have these, the smaller tasks that kind of can build that. And then, it's interesting when we look at when we are got a creative or longer term project, the more we can kind of break it down so it's not as daunting and open ended. um, I think I think that can be a useful tool. Not to say it's always the case, but if you can break it down to say, I need the roadmap first of all. Let me play with the roadmap rather than trying to figure out how you're going to get the whole thing done. That might make it one of those smaller pieces that can require your attention and problem solving rather than I need all the creative energy, which I think it opens up the brain and you just don't know what's going to come in sometimes when that happens.
No, I completely agree. The thing is that I want to capture, I know my peak time to work is 11 to 2,
Hmm.
maybe 3, and then I'll feel the dip, right? Whether that's the ADHD
Yes.
medication, let's not talk about it, but like at the end of the day, I've always been like that, even without it. The thing is
Yep.
that when I feel that creative moment, even though it's not the task that's on, I don't want to lose the words. And I can't even write things for myself. Like if I have to do my own bio, it's not going to happen. But
Yeah.
it's just a weird thing. I don't want to ruin a creative moment, but I also don't
Yes.
want to get so off track. And I don't think there really isn't, all your things are awesome because all of them I've tried, and one day they'll work and the next day that one won't work and I'll have to,
Ah,
it's literally like a pencil holder, and I pull a pencil out and I'll see which one. I'll keep pulling a pencil, but the day might already be half gone. So, but all of them,
yeah.
I'm glad that I'm on the right track. That's what's amazing. And your voice is so soothing. And I'm always on the ADD like attitude, like webinars that they do
Yes.
for ADHD, but yours
Yes.
is like the most soothing voice, most concise. It's so ironic. All these people they get on and they never can like speak how you need it to be spoken as you are neurodivergent yourself. So I think you're awesome so far. Everything that I've just come into you as of this moment as this site, and I'm very glad. So I'm glad I'm on the right track. It's just every day I need a whole pencil holder with all these different things to try, and I do them. So at least I feel positive that I've got the I don't know, pack of pencils going
You
on.
you
So
do. And
thank
Tiffany,
you.
I just thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the kind words. They mean a lot to me. And I want you to applaud. Here's the thing, I think we're pretty hard on ourselves too. And I want everybody who's neurodivergent to feel like we're carrying a we're carrying a tougher load because we're paying a lot of tax as we get things done. So I want you to give yourself extra applause at the end of the day for the small things, for the big things, for all the things, for getting off track and getting on track again, for getting off track and finding something that you didn't know you were going to uncover. Keep being super kind to yourself and super appreciative of all that creative energy. There is just untold beauty and creativity in our neurodivergent brains, and our construct of work doesn't always have room for it. And so that's my big goal, is that I'm trying to expand thinking to say, gosh, we need to make room for brains that work differently, processes that work differently, and um, change the expectation to allow for that variety. So, Tiffany, good luck in the job search. Keep that pencil pack close. Keep being curious about yourself, and definitely keep applauding yourself numerous times throughout the day for the small things that feel really good. I want you to celebrate yourself really, really hard. I know there's more questions here, which I'm really excited about. I want to just drop a couple of other thoughts for you. Daniel Pink talks about focus, and he talks in his book When, which is talking about when to do things. It's a brilliant read. He says something. He says, keep your highest energy time for your analytical work and your creative time for a dip. I'm not so sure. I'm wondering if Tiffany might say, wait a minute, my creative time is the most valuable time. So I want that with my highest energy. I'm curious if he's really delved into the kind of workers, or if that's typical office work and where we maybe undervalue creativity. But I think to look at, again, I would say make it really personal and look at where you want to match your greatest amount of focus energy. And some research by K. Ander Erickson, K. Ander Erickson, the initial K. Ander Erickson. His research, I think it's a he. The research says that few can engage in more than 4 to 5 hours a day of high concentration or deliberate practice. If you listen to Stephen King talk about his writing, it's about a morning. It's a half a day. We have our work days set up to be these 8+ hour days, and they're unreasonable. So there have been movements to try and make a 6-hour workday, the 4-day work week. I'm all for that, but you can't make it a 10 or 12-hour day of pure cognitive brain work. So we have to actually look at how we work best. There was a study done by Desk Time in 2018 talking about the most productive employees working for 52 minutes, followed by 17 minutes of rest. And one of the things we forget to do in our workday is take adequate rest. Although Raphael will know for sure that I nap before coaching calls, I take regular breaks. He'll know that I'm when I'm on, I probably rested beforehand to make sure that I can really deliver my full energy. So I just wanted there to you to be kind to your brain and not have some false sense of expectation of how it should operate. And I see a couple of names in the room. I see Christine and I see Megan. Raphael, do you know who was there first?
Yeah, Megan. And also for you to know, it's Megan. Then we have an anonymous question in my DM, and then
Okay.
it's Christine.
Okay, thank you. So let's start with Megan, and then we'll come to the anonymous question. Thank you so much, and I love that you're asking questions. It makes me so happy. Megan, what have you got?
Hi there. So I just wanted to ask, when you talked about having like a physical timer, I've used like a app for using the Pomodoro method before, so it will literally send me a ping or a notification, and it's like, hey, time to have a 5-minute break, time to get back to work. Is that something that would satisfy that more physical passage of time, or would you still recommend like even getting like an actual timer?
I'm going to say it depends, Megan. And I thank you for the question, because the Pomodoro method works for a lot of people. 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off, small bursts of activity focused on something. You can beat that 20 minutes. And for a lot of people, that really works. If you want to get into deep focus, though, and a longer, deeper, like really bury in something, I think 20 minutes is too short. So when I'm coaching in organizations, I often recommend 60 to 90-minute periods of deep focused, uninterrupted work, one session 100% in the morning, so that you can get things done that you're really feeling proud of. I say you put money in your own bank, if you will. And if you can get another focus session in the afternoon, you never finish your day thinking, what did I do today? All I was doing was responding. But that time can be very personal, and it can also depend on the kind of work you're doing. So, Megan, when I say that, what would it feel comfortable for you to try a longer time?
Yeah, I think it depends what I'm doing. So like I feel like if I'm doing housework and stuff, I find the Pomodoro a little bit more effective because it's not as um, like brain power heavy. But
Mm-hmm.
I see what you're saying of like when you really need to concentrate, blocking out like that hour 30 to
Yeah.
really get into it, like any analytics work. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, so I've been working on a couple books over the years, and I would find that I would write in about 75-minute to 90-minute spurts. And it was my bum getting numb from sitting that would kind of pull me out of the flow. And I would have hated to be interrupted by a 20-minute timer going off in that circumstance. But for something else where you don't mind being interrupted, like house cleaning, potentially it's like, oh my gosh, thank goodness the alarm just went. I don't know, but I think yeah, play with it, and figure out for what task it will serve you.
Okay. I did have a second question though, because I find sometimes when I am setting aside like an larger chunk, like an hour to work on something, if I don't finish it,
Mhm.
like I have that real desire. I'm like, no, I need to get this finished before I move on to the next class. I don't know if that's
Yeah, excellent. I mean, that's part of the adrenaline boost that can come from, I call it playing beat the clock, right? You've given yourself this time. And one of the things in the pandemic that happened for a lot of people was a blurry line between work and home. And even a lot of my clients who get stuck kind of overworking, I often think it's because there's not something after the work session to look forward to, so that they can say, "Oh my gosh, I want to finish this because I'm going to play tennis tonight with my friend, or I'm going to invite people over for dinner, or I'm going for a walk." Whatever it is, there has to be something that you're looking forward to that helps you move with momentum through your day, and then the timer is really useful to help you give you that boundary.
okay. Perfect. Thanks so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks, Megan. And Raphael, you have a question for me.
Yes, we do. And okay, so this is an anonymous question from a person who works at an agency. And this person says that, asks you, how do you manage your time effectively when you're at a workplace that does not honor boundaries and books your entire working day with nonstop meetings that lead to working at night and getting burned out?
Short answer, that's not an organization who's taking care of people. That's potentially an organization that's treating humans like commodities and willing to burn them out. So I always look at what can you do to control your own experience? How can you speak up for and ask for what you need? And when do you need to recognize that you're in a system that is not serving you? And what you're describing, unfortunately, sounds like a system that's not serving you. I tried for a year to negotiate the flexibility that I needed in my last corporate experience. You can hear in the first episode of the Happy Space podcast how that did not turn out the way I was hoping it would. And so I had to negotiate my departure from the corporate world, and I've only gone back to serving the corporate world with full autonomy as my as an entrepreneur now. What I'm excited by is there are more and more organizations that understand that flexibility is very, very important, that uh, well-managed workloads. Quite frankly, it's a leadership failure if the workload is not being right-sized for the capacity of the individual. But a lot of times, leaders are planning, assuming that human capacity is static, and it's not. We know very, very well that it fluctuates, and for all kinds of reasons in our control and beyond our control. So my recommendation is do what you can to preserve your ability to work the way you need to. Ask for what you need. The book I'm working on is called, working title is Ask Already, and it's all about finding your voice to speak up for what you need. And if you're finding that it's not being well received, then the writing might be on the wall that you need to look for an organization that's actually going to care for humans. I hope that's helpful. Um, Christine, I think you're next. One more question from you.
Hi, Claire. Thank you so much for all of this. Um, I have been smiling throughout the evening because I hear you keep referring to books. And my question is about reading, because my struggle is while I grew up as a child reading books, when I hit my early 40s, I started to struggle with focus.
Mhm.
And I wanted to know if you've had any experience in your coaching around advice for people who do struggle with reading. I've taken the attempt of kind of like a child listening to Audible and reading a book at the same time, and it
Mhm.
works when all the conditions are right. but I feel like it put additional pressure on me to, to try to get into it. So I guess my question is, if you have any advice and if you've come across anyone else who struggled with that in the past.
Christine, thank you so much for the question. And I feel that it must be a big frustration if it's something that you've loved to do, but holding your attention to reading sounds more challenging than it used to be. I think that, and I haven't had somebody bring me this exact question, but what it's bringing up for me is connecting to that ability to slow the brain down. I have a feeling that social media and the pace of our world and even our TV screens, I just noticed that a TV show that I've been on for about a decade, they now no longer just have a ticker at the bottom, they have a ticker at the top of the screen. And I think our ability to focus is under threat, and we have to be practicing without pressure. So please take the pressure off yourself to perform in any certain way, and just see how you can slow down and let your brain slow down. I think meditation and coming to practice a mantra, a repetitive saying, it builds the ability to slow that brain down, which hopefully can then extend into the reading experience to allow your brain to be more comfortable in the moment without seeking that continual hyperstimulation, I think, that we're getting used to. I'm wondering if that sounds like it might be on track, or there's another thought that came to mind, and this is, I saw recently a new kind of a reader, which was not a traditional book on a page. It was showing you the word, but the word letters, like you looked at one point on the screen. So imagine a dot on the screen, and that dot showed you the changing letters. So your eyes didn't have to flick left and right to read a page. The characters changed and you looked at a focus point. And I can't imagine that that's good for your eyes, but they were saying that was, people were finding that in another way to read that was kind of novel and effective for some. But I think the trick is in being able to slow down potentially, to be able to be okay with less coming in. Or maybe you're like me, and when I studied when I was in university, I had to eat 3-pound bags of sunflower seeds just to hold my focus to reading.
Yeah, that does sound like me. And I think you've said it well. I think my challenge is I'm trying to do it at night. I do meditate. I tend to meditate in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just nudging me to remind me that I also need to do that into the evening as well. So I'll give it a shot and buy some sunflower seeds as well. So thank you.
Well, I found out much later on that there's tryptophan in sunflower seeds, which are actually good for the brain and for sleep. So there were some like unknown wonderful things that I just happened to happen upon when I was 17 and went to university. So thank you so much for that question. I'm noticing the time, and boy, would it be really terrible if I could not manage time on a manager time talk. So noticing the time here, I just want to flag your attention one more time to clarekumar.com/fishbowl. And you'll see not only resources for today, you'll see you'll see an image there. As I wanted to talk, this is the last point I'm going to drop for you, is coloring your calendar is a power tool. And there's a diagram on the website that shows you how I divide up 6 different areas of my life and I give them each a color. It's how I store my files on my computer, and it's how I also color my calendar so that when I look on my calendar, I can see where I'm investing my energy, and it's reflected very quickly back to me in color. So I wanted to just invite you all to go check that out. You don't need to sign up for anything. It's there for you to enjoy. If you want to go through a reflective workshop on managing time, not just time, but lifetime management, there's an offer there for a workbook that has a bigger picture of the diagram and some more instruction on that. That's there for you as well. I want to thank you so much for being with me today and for offering up your questions and being in conversation. This just lit me up. It's the fastest, best hour of my week. It gave me all the energy and feedback and made me feel like, I work on my own predominantly, and I do a lot of stuff, and this gave me a lot of feedback to make me feel like it's valuable. So thank you so much for participating here. You are so welcome. Reach out to me on Fishbowl Live. Know that I'm commenting on Glassdoor every week. I'm writing posts in there in the Work-Life Bowl. And I look forward to being in touch with each and every one of you. Thanks again so much for joining.